But yeah, not looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Not looking forward to that.
Here is the, oh, here it is.
Whenever you're ready, Christina.
Yes, sir. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's City Council meeting. We appreciate your presence as we discuss matters that impact our community. Your participation is invaluable. For the record, today is May 1st, 2025, and the time is 6:31. I'll begin with the roll call. So council, when I call your name, please say here or present. Mayor Maxton,
Here.
Councilmember Stroop,
Here.
Roden,
Here.
Olvera,
Here.
Kerner,
Present.
Parker is not present, and Councilmember Swarik.
Here.
With 6 members of council present, a quorum is declared.
Thank you, Christina. And would everybody please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
And to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And thank you all. That sounded good. Everybody sounded off loud. Reminder to everybody tonight that we do live broadcast this meeting, and would like to welcome everybody that's here in the room. We'd also like to welcome all those that are joining us by live broadcast. For those that are here in the room, if you do get an opportunity to speak as part of the meeting, I would ask that you make your comments from the podium up here. And the reason for that is that the individuals that are watching us by live broadcast cannot hear the comments if you make them from your seat. They need to be made over the mic at the podium. And if you do get an opportunity to make comments, I'd ask that you introduce yourself and state whether or not you're a resident of Fair Oaks Ranch, or if you're here with a company that's presenting as part of tonight's meeting, I just ask you to say which company that you are representing. With that, we'll move on to our citizens to be heard. And just a reminder to all, as part of citizens to be heard, in accordance with the Open Meetings Act, council may not discuss or take action on any item which has not been posted on the agenda. And also I ask that all speakers please limit their comments to 5 minutes. And we had one individual that signed up to speak tonight. Carol? Ms. Willoughby signed up to speak.
Oh, it's not that bad. Now, come on. It's not that bad. Where is it? Okay, all right. Thank you. All right. Just wanted to start with congratulating City Council Corner for the 8 years of service. We have heard you loud and clear, and we appreciate all that. We know it's not easy. I know that y'all are very dedicated city councilmen. You've signed up for a hard job, a long job, an intense job, and a job that gets a lot of criticism. I wanted to thank the chief of police, but he's not here, and you for doing the soft close on the door that bangs. I think that happened. It doesn't still seem to be as loud as it once was on the police department coming in from the parking lot. I am Carol Willoughby. I'm with Chartwell in Fair Oaks Ranch, and that's why we can hear that door, because we're right behind this building. Some improvements I'd just like to ask about is transparency. I do believe that sometimes things are happening and decisions are being made, discussed, and sometimes we as citizens get a little confused on when that decision was made. Because as we come here to the city council meeting, a lot of times it's a quick vote. And I do realize that some of you have sent emails and made comments about the transparencies there, and it has improved. And thank you for that. Also, the interpretation of a lot of things that do go out can be misconstrued just due to the punctuation or the sentence structure that is used. But I do acknowledge the improvement of communication, the videos that have gone out, and some communication that has shown up more on Nextdoor. So thank you for that. We're wondering about the timeline for the Civic Center, Community Center, whatever it's going to be called. What is that timeline looking like? Where are we now? We know all the bids have come in, but we're just curious. There is a bid evidently that has shown more promise than the others and will maybe be interviewed and worked through. Will we ever know how much that's for? Will we know who was it? That kind of transparency is what we're looking for. The spending seems to be, you've got some really good bulldogs here that are going to watch where the pennies go and how they're spent. And we as citizens sure appreciate that. One question is about the private events for the Civic Center. Will that actually be happening where a citizen can rent the Civic Center for an event that they like of their choosing within the regulations that are set forth? Will that be happening or not? And if it doesn't happen, will that still be approved by the MDD? Since it's not going to be open to the public as far as the public residents of Fair Oaks Ranch. That's all I have to say. Y'all have a great evening. Thank you.
Ms. Willoughby, thank you for being here tonight, and I appreciate the comments that you provided. Ms. Willoughby was the only individual that signed up to speak as part of Citizens to be Heard. Is there anybody else here tonight that didn't get an opportunity to sign up that would like to speak? Ms. Brimhall.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Sharon Brimhall. I live over on the Parkway. And thank you, Laura, for your service. And we thank all of y'all for your service and the time that it takes to have these meetings twice a month. But anyway, I agree with Carol Willoughby very much. And I did have a question about the use of the center because last year we were kind of led to believe that it would be rentable by residents, but now it seems that's not the case. So I'm also curious if that's not the case, then I understand that civic groups will meet there, Forha will meet there. Is that right? Anyway, I was just wondering, kind of, since Forha is a separate entity, are they going to pay rent to use this facility? That's a minor thing, just a question. Right now, I saw a post somewhere about a bidder that had a question about the oak trees and if they might survive this massive construction. I hearkened back to when San Antonio decided to redo Main Plaza, which was a beautiful Spanish colonial fountain-centered plaza with heritage oak shades, park benches. It was lovely. They decided to expand the masonry footprint, and all those trees had to go. They didn't make it. And what they did, instead of the oak trees, they put up those sail shades, and it kind of looked like a border town market. Okay, but anyway, that just concerned me. You know, I hadn't thought about that till I saw a thing about the trees. And also, I'm kind of wondering, we've heard that that existing structure has asbestos and lead paint, and that it's too expensive to mediate, and we shouldn't do that. I understand that, but that seems to have been the original plan 5 or 6 years ago when y'all kicked yourselves out of the city hall, was to renovate that building and move over there, which would be perfect. That building fits perfect on our campus along with the Forha office. They match. They look very, very good. In my mind, I'm trying to picture a 5,300 square foot new structure sitting on the campus next to City Hall and Forha office. Sorry, but I don't think Forha office is gonna look that good next to the new building. These are just some comments. We appreciate y'all's help, but thank you for keeping us informed. Also, the cost is way, way out of sight. And if I understand right, MDD funds can be used to purchase real estate and build a civic center. So a civic center would be great. Y'all convince me, that'd be great. But I'm thinking not at this location. Our city campus is beautiful with the buildings that are on it and with the beautiful oak trees. And I hope we can just remodel the structure and keep everything gorgeous with the oaks. Thank y'all.
Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate your comments. Is there anybody else that didn't get an opportunity to sign up that would like to speak? Okay, we'll move on to our presentations tonight, and that seems to be me. We have 4 presentations, and we're going to start off with our professional municipal clerks. And Christina, would you please join me down here? Do what? But you're good now. The week of May 4th, next week, is the week for Professional Municipal Clerks Week. And so tonight, I'd like to take a moment to recognize, as we celebrate 2 public servants who often work behind the scenes, do a lot of work behind the scenes, but who also play a central role in the success and the transparency of our local government. And those 2 individuals, Christina Pachocchio, our city secretary, and Amanda Valdez, who is not here tonight, in the Bahamas, Dominican Republic, enjoying a little time off, but who is our deputy city secretary. So Professional Municipal Clerks Week is an opportunity to express our deep appreciation for their dedication, their accuracy, their integrity, and commitment to service. They maintain our official records. They ensure we have open and accessible government. They support city council meetings and also all of the meetings of our boards, committees, and commissions. And they manage our elections and our public notices. In many ways, they are the backbone of our municipal operations. And these 2, with their attention to detail and commitment to excellence in accomplishing these tasks, ensure that our city runs smoothly and that our residents remain informed and engaged. Christina and Amanda both embody the professionalism, the patience, and public spirit that define effective local government. And so on behalf of the City of Fair Oaks Ranch, I extend heartfelt gratitude to Christina and Amanda, and want you to know that your work does not go unnoticed, even though you work a lot behind the scenes, and your impact is deeply appreciated. So thank you for all you do for the city. And I do have a short proclamation that is presented from the City of Fair Oaks Ranch, whereas the office of the professional municipal clerk is the oldest among public servants and provides the professional link between the citizens, the local government bodies, and agencies of government at other levels. Professional municipal clerks have pledged to be ever mindful of their neutrality and impartiality, rendering equal service to all. They prepare, post, and advertise notices of the agenda for all official public meetings of city council boards and commissions. They administer municipal elections according to established election schedules in accordance with all laws, our city charter, the Texas Elections Code, regulations, and standards. And they maintain the seal of the city and affix that seal to all appropriate documents. So it is therefore appropriate that we recognize the accomplishments of the office of the professional municipal clerk, and that the City Council of the City of Fair Oaks Ranch hereby recognizes the week of May 4th through May 10th as Professional Municipal Clerks Week, and further extend our appreciation to our professional municipal clerks, Christina Pachocchio and Amanda Valdez, and to all professional municipal clerks for the vital service that they perform and their exemplary dedication to communities that they represent. And can we give them... Amanda's missing out. And Alex, would you join me now? Are y'all going to come in too? Is this all we can pull in?
Yes, sir. we got a couple more out.
We have a couple doing their job? That's good. So the week of May 11th through May 17th is Police Recognition Week. And we are incredibly proud of the outstanding men and women who serve in our Fair Oaks Ranch Police Department and who you're representing here tonight. But please pass on to all the others how much we appreciate what they do on a daily basis. So under the leadership of Police Chief Todd Smith, and I forgot to mention, Alex Willis, all those police officers, Sergeant Alex Willis. Chief is off bike riding in Arkansas.
Arkansas, correct?
And Alex is our acting lieutenant for the police department and is representing the chief of police here tonight as part of this meeting. I apologize. So under the leadership of Police Chief Todd Smith, our department continues to set the standard for professionalism, integrity, and dedicated service to our community. They operate under the motto of "We Go First," a powerful statement that carries two meanings. First, they are the first to step into danger to protect the residents of our city, undoubtedly the first step of all police officers, and they take that seriously in what they need to accomplish. But I think what stands out more is what's second. They are the first to build bridges between officers and the community, breaking down the barriers to create trust and cooperation between our police department and our residents. A strong community relations are essential to maintaining a safe and a welcoming environment. Our residents are the eyes and ears of our neighborhoods, and through collaboration with our police officers, we've built a foundation of mutual respect and shared responsibility that we will continue to expand. Now, because of the strong partnership, our city was recently named as the 16th safest city in the state of Texas. That's out of 1,900 cities. We were also identified as the safest city in the greater San Antonio area. This incredible recognition is a direct result of the dedication and the courage and the work of our police department, represented by the individuals that are up here tonight. So I'd ask all residents of the city of Fair Oaks Ranch during the week of May 11th through May 17th, please reach out to our police department. Come up here and see them. Please say hi to them on the road. Just by waving is enough to say hello. Or if you see them on the street and you have an opportunity to speak to them, please don't pass that opportunity. We have a great police department, phenomenal individuals, and I'm so proud of the work that they do every day. And we do have a proclamation for the police department also from the city of Fair Oaks Ranch, whereas the Congress and the President of the United States have designated May 15, 2025 as Peace Officers Memorial Day, and the week in which it falls is Police Week. And whereas the members of the Fair Oaks Ranch Police Department play an essential role in the safeguarding the rights and the freedoms of the citizens of the city of Fair Oaks Ranch. It is important that all citizens know and they understand the problems, duties, and the responsibilities of our police department, and that the members of our police department recognize their duty to serve the people by safeguarding life and property, by protecting them against violence or disorder, and protecting the innocent against deception and the weak against oppression or intimidation. The police department of the city of Fair Oaks Ranch has grown to be a modern law enforcement agency which unceasingly provides a vital public service to our city and to our residents. Now and therefore, the City Council calls upon all citizens of the city of Fair Oaks Ranch and upon all patriotic, civil, and educational organizations to observe the week of May 11th through May 17th, 2025 as Police Week, with appropriate ceremonies in which all of our people may join in commemorating police officers, past and present, and by their faithful and loyal devotion to their responsibilities have rendered a dedicated service to their communities, and in doing so have established for themselves an enviable and enduring reputation for preserving the rights and the security of all citizens. We further call upon all citizens of Fair Oaks Ranch to observe May 15th as Peace Officers Memorial Day to honor those peace officers who, through their courageous deeds, have lost their lives or have become disabled in the performance of their duty. And I'd like to thank y'all publicly for everything you do every day to make this city safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you all very much. And you're welcome to stick around for the rest of the meeting. You got work to do. The last proclamation that I have is in recognition of Lemonade Day. So Lemonade Day is this Saturday, May 3rd. And it's a fun and entertaining event focused on teaching our kids the basics of operating a small business. So on Saturday, I hope to see a lot of lemonade stands throughout the city. I've seen the advertisements in Bernie, and I think they're putting them on Main Street. But if you do see them, please compliment our kids. If you have an opportunity, stop by and get a glass of lemonade and encourage them in the positive things that they're doing for themselves. But from the city of Fair Oaks Ranch, whereas Lemonade Day is a free, community-wide educational event providing children with the opportunity to learn and apply entrepreneurial thinking. And whereas Lemonade Day exists to infuse today's youth with the spirit of enterprise, teaching the basic business entrepreneurial skills necessary to become successful contributing members of our community. Lemonade Day offers opportunities for families, businesses, schools, youth organizations, faith-based communities, neighborhoods, institutes of higher learning, and government agencies to unite for a common purpose. And that common purpose is to train the next generation of entrepreneurs. So now and therefore, the City Council of the City of Fair Oaks Ranch, Texas hereby proclaims May 3rd, 2025 as Lemonade Day in Fair Oaks Ranch, and the citizens of Fair Oaks Ranch are encouraged to participate in Lemonade Day activities to contribute to the success of this event. And I would just offer, whatever we can do, let's support our kids. Thanks. And Laura, would you please join me up here? This is Council Member, Councilwoman Kerner's last meeting as part of her current term that she's serving in. And we did a little goodbye for her earlier tonight, but she is the first council member, and I believe it's accurate, to reach a term limit within our council. So tonight we honor and we recognize Councilwoman Laura Kerner for the exceptional service that she has provided to the city of Fair Oaks Ranch. Her commitment has always been centered on doing what is right for our residents, doing what is right for the operations of our city, and really overall, you can just say doing what is right. And it's great to have an individual of that integrity that serves on our council that ensures that we are doing what is right. Laura has served from 2017 to 2025 on the city council. It's 8 years. And it's not just the length of service that deserves recognition here. Obviously, 8 years is a significant commitment to our city. But she also has contributed deep knowledge, unwavering integrity, and a steady perseverance that will continue to have a lasting appearance on our city council, and our city staff. So I was going through this in 8 years. I looked at that, probably estimated that's 200 council meetings that Laura's been at. And in preparing for those council meetings, just as a councilwoman and what she's done, I estimated, preparing for meetings and attending meetings, that she has contributed over 3,000 hours of her own time as a public servant to our city. She began her tenure as we transitioned to a home rule charter city. Laura's been pivotal in our history, in helping and being instrumental in developing the foundation documents that we needed for the operations of our city, which include our comprehensive plan, our unified development code, the master plans for our water, our wastewater, and our stormwater systems, and our strategic action plan. And in the recent years, she has used these tools to help us in planning and making informed decisions and prioritizing the special projects that surround our community. And I mentioned to her earlier that at times, those 8 years may have seemed like you were going through a marathon that would never end. But tonight, as she attends her last meeting as part of this term, I would believe that you would look back on this and go, it happened too quickly. But you made a lot of accomplishments. You definitely made your presence known. And for the years to come, we'll look back on this and be able to reflect on all that you have done for the city. So thank you very much, Laura. And we do have an award for Laura Kerner, council member from 2017 to 2025, in honor of your dedication and service to the city of Fair Oaks Ranch. Thank you very much. Would you like to make a?
First, I'd like all of council to come and staff. Sorry, guys. You want to come?
I'll come. Did you want to make a couple comments or?
I'll just make my comment short since I spoke earlier at the earlier celebration, and I appreciate that. One, I just want to first thank my family, thank my husband Mike and my daughters. They were here at my first city council meeting as well, and the girls were this tall, so much taller now. And they've been through all this with us, and so I think they probably know more about what goes on in the city than anybody else. So thanks for listening all those nights. Want to just thank staff for all the amazing support you've done, city council members for all of your support, and of course all the residents for everything, all the feedback and all the comments and the engagement that you guys have. You have, we have an amazing city with amazing residents, and they have a lot to say, and we like to listen to them. So appreciate the opportunity to serve, and think I'll appreciate the break too for a bit. So thank you so much.
Well, that completes the presentations that we had on the agenda for tonight. We'll move on to our consent agenda. We do have 7 items on the consent agenda tonight. And first is approval of the April 17th, 2025 regular city council meeting minutes. Second, approval of the second reading of an ordinance amending the budget for the fiscal year beginning October 1st, 2024 and ending September 30th, 2025. Third, approval of the second reading of an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Fair Oaks Ranch, Texas, amending the Fair Oaks Ranch Code of Ordinances, Chapter 12, Traffic and Vehicles, Article 12.01, General Provisions, Section 12.01.002, stop and yield signs by establishing a 4-way stop intersection at Battle Intense, High Echelon, and Hansel Drive. And next, approval of the second reading of an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Fair Oaks Ranch, Texas, amending Chapter 1 General Provisions, Article 1.08 Boards, Commissions, and Committees, Section 1.08001 Municipal Development District, Board of Directors of the City of Fair Oaks Ranch Code of Ordinances. Next, approval of a resolution authorizing the execution of an agreement with Clark Construction of Texas Incorporated for mill and overlay road construction, expenditure of the required funds, and execution of all applicable documents by the city manager. And six, approval of a resolution authorizing the execution of an agreement with Intermountain Slurry Seal Incorporated for micro surfacing, expenditure of the required funds, and the execution of all applicable documents by the city manager. And last, approval of a resolution authorizing the execution of a purchase order with Chastain Ford for a Ford F-450, expenditure of the required funds, and execution of all applicable documents by the city manager. Is there any of these items that any council member would like removed from consent into consideration? Then with that, can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
From Emily in a second,
Second.
from Keith. And all in favor of approval of the consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The consent agenda is approved. Thank you all. The first consideration item that we have on the agenda for tonight is the consideration and possible action approving a resolution which would amend the City of Fair Oaks Ranch's personnel policies. And Jim, you've been working on these, and you're going to lead us through this?
We've been doing some work, Mayor.
Yes, you have.
So, before I get started, I just want to do a quick plug. Assuming that these get passed tonight, we are over the hump. We are over we would be more than halfway done with this process. So, thank you for indulging this needed work. The other thing too, just a plug, you might have noticed some of the detail in the policies that we've been presenting. That's for a reason. And the reason that we put that out there so our frontline supervisors and our staff really has some guidance when they're in the field doing work for the city. They don't need to go to a federal regulation or a state statute to figure out what to do. We sometimes parrot that in our policies so that it's a useful guide for those employees. So just keep that in mind. If you see, wow, that's awfully kind of lawyerly looking or legally, it's really kind of toned down. It's a useful tool for the supervisors. So here we go for tonight. So tonight, the batch in front of us, we have 4 things. First up is we have Chapter 3, Hiring Practices. Chapter 4, Types of Employment. Chapter 10, Health and Safety. And drum roll, First Amendment for a policy chapter that you have already passed. So I'll get more to that in just a second here. So let's go. So Chapter 3, the primary reason for change, theme across what you're seeing a lot of now is just general cleanup to match our current practices. We also update our EEO policy to match almost literally word for word the federal law for equal employment opportunity, how we do it here in the city. It also clarifies in the policy how we're going to actually do hiring and promotions, and we're going to do that in the city based on qualifications, merit, and business need. That's it. Some other reasons for Chapter 3 getting changed, adds improved guidance on the pre-hire medical exams. So when we have a candidate for employment, we do a medical screen for them. We just give guidance to the HR staff, has that as a written policy. We also add objective criteria for the manager to consider. Sometimes, or there could be an occasion where an immediate family members, they're maybe married or cohabitate, and there's suddenly a supervisory conflict. The current policy says, yeah, the employees go figure it out, and if they can't, the manager or CDC manager just go to make a decision. We advise that you probably should have some objective criteria for that. So we just added that in there. And then we also added in and clarified criteria that would disqualify a person who's under the age of 18 years of age from working for the city. And typically that would be things like hazardous working conditions, confined spaces, things like that. We don't want to employ folks under the age of 18 to put them in that kind of position. Also adds internal competitive consideration as one of our recruitment methods, and it removes the list keeping method as one of our recruitment methods. We really pretty much don't want to keep a list. If we have an open job, we recruit for it. When that recruitment's over, everything goes back to basic, back to the beginning. And then we look at the pre-employment driving record and credit check standards, just how we're going to actually do that as a city. and then updates the I-9 employment eligibility verification procedures. It just matches federal law, and it's used as a guide for employees. The gist of it is, if you can't produce your I-9 documents within 3 days, you can't keep working for us. That's the federal law. And then it clarifies the new hire onboarding expectations, what we're going to do when a new employee starts working for us, how that's going to go in their first few days here. And then service credit adjustments for prior service employees. So the example would be a person worked for us for a while, then they had a break in service and they came back. Our current policy is they reset to zero time in service. But if they stay for 2 years, we'll catch them back up all that prior service credit. It's an incentive for them to keep staying longer. So that's it for chapter 3. I'm in the right one. Let me check here real quick. Chapter 4. So this is a type of employment. This chapter is called Types of Employment, and basically what it spells out that it's the general types of employees that we have here in the city. We do have 3 types. One is a regular full-time employee. One is a regular part-time employee, and then a temporary employee. In each of those categories, it clarifies in the policy what the work hour requirements are to be in that category, what the scheduled work hour requirements are, and then what the thresholds are for, like you can't be a temporary employee and work over 1,000 hours because it gets us in trouble with Texas Municipal Retirement System. Okay, so it just boxes that in for us so we stay compliant. It updates our initial employment period time. So initial employment period, some places in the policy it said 6 months, some places said 90 days. It's 6 months for your probationary period. It just updates that real quick. And then it clarifies when that first performance evaluation is due for new employees. This is a big one for tonight, health and safety chapter. There's a number of reasons for change. I think the biggest one is in the current policy. It basically says employees come to work here and they accept all the safety risks. Have a good time. No, it really is a shared responsibility between frontline supervisors and the employees. Frontline supervisors need to be looking out and making sure they're following the rules, wearing all the safety gear, and employees need to do the things the supervisors ask them to do. So it spells all that out. It also updates our workers' compensation guidance to match our current practice. So when an employee goes out on workers' compensation, this is how we're going to handle it, and it's very clear. It also adds to our health and safety policy a new section. It's our drug and alcohol-free workplace policy. We did not have that before. We kind of did have a small blurb about that, but it was not sufficient. It does address the mandatory post-accident testing, which matches Chapter 11. You'll see that amendment here in just a second. And then it does provide standards for if a supervisor or a manager had reasonable suspicion that an employee was under the influence, and how you would handle that. It articulates in no mixed words what the consequences of a policy violation are, and it also talks about it spells out our pre-employment testing standards. Okay, here's the amendment. The first, when we passed 11, section 11, chapter 11 a few weeks ago, in section 11.09, it basically talked about post-accident drug testing and alcohol testing. If you got into an accident, it was at the discretion of the city manager. Scott and I have been talking about that's probably not what we need to be doing. We just need to take the discretion part out of there. So that's what this amendment does. It's just flat out mandatory. That's what we're going to do. And that also makes it consistent with Chapter 10. And with that, I am done. I'll take questions.
So a couple of things here, just maybe pedantics on 3.04. You don't allow people under the age of 16 or under the age of 18, which 16-year-olds are, and then you skip down one and you have rules for if we do employ someone under the age of 18, then these are the rules that you'll abide by while employed.
Which section was that, sir?
3.02. On mine, it's page 94, and I look at the red line.
And can you repeat your question?
So it says in there that you don't employ anyone under the age of 16. Then it says that you don't employ anyone under the age of 18. Mm-hmm. And then it says if we do employ anyone under the age of 18, these are the rules that they'll follow.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so it seems kind of like, why do we have rules for it if we're not allowing it?
So
Are there special cases that
Right. So it's Dan, help me out. It's not Fair Labor Standards Act. It's it's a federal law that basically says for child labor, you have to follow certain rules. And it is U.S. Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938. Excuse me, it's right there quoted. So for here at the city, what we don't want to do, so for sure, everybody under the 18 has to have a parent sign off on it, or guardian, legal guardian sign off on it. And then in addition to that, we're not going to employ anybody in hazardous conditions who are under the age of 18. And then flat out, we just don't employ people under the age of 16. That's the policy request.
Or 18, correct?
18 if they have a signed minor's release form and it's not in a hazardous employment condition.
Okay, it says here, individuals under the age of 18 will not be employed in any occupation.
That is considered hazardous.
Yeah,
Okay, yeah, I see it here.
yeah.
And then if you go over to 10.0203 on page 102, and it's talking about PPE, it says employees who refuse to wear the required safety equipment or follow safety instructions will be subject to disciplinary action. I would recommend to change that to, first, they need to be off the job site where the PPE is required. Right, so if they're operating a piece of machinery, or if they're somewhere where there's supposed to be a hard hat, because, you know, we could take liability if something happens from a head strike, there's something overhead. I would say that definitely they need to leave that job site, and then we can figure out disciplinary action or.
So can you, I think, sir, I think we addressed that concern. If you go to 10.0204. 10.0204. If I understood your question.
10.0204 is just
Yes,
struck
sir.
out. for me.
Basically, I'm sorry, 10.05. Dan, I'm not trying to poke you with a laser in my face there. If we see job-related hazards that aren't being mitigated, which would mean catch an employee not wearing their PPE, the supervisor stops the work immediately and gets them to fix that. We correct that hazard on the spot.
Okay, very good.
Does that cover your question,
Yep,
sir?
absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
Great question, by the way. Thank you.
I just have one question that in 4.0101, I'm a little concerned about the word permanent positions referenced in regular full-time and regular part-time. So I think the way it's worded, if we just said regular full-time employees or individuals employed to authorized positions, I think that is clear. Permanent kind of gives a confusing tone to me, so that's my only recommended change there. No position's permanent. It's a right-to-work state, so just wanted to make that clear and not get the city into any kind of representation or warrant that could be misinterpreted.
Yes, sir, your point's well taken. I totally agree. What we were trying to articulate in the busyness of doing this was just to really differentiate a regular employee from a temporary employee, and it's just trying to use words, but that doesn't really change. If that was to go away, it wouldn't change the intent. So it's welcome comment, sir. Thank you.
Okay.
Could you call it a full-time employee then instead of permanent?
I would say Scott and I talked about this. I think if we went regular full-time employees are individuals employed to authorized positions. So those are positions that are identified and funded by the city council, and then that would cover us. And take the permanent thing and kind of get more of that at-will kind of standard that
Right.
we have. Yep. And sir, I drafted an amendment for you if you.
And I've got it ready to read. Thank you. Whenever.
So on this, I mean, what you're proposing is the strikeout of permanent under regular full-time and regular part-time?
Right.
Okay. Is everybody okay with that? Any concerns? All right. Anybody else? Any other questions? Any questions from anyone here tonight on the personnel policies? Then can I get a motion to approve a resolution amending the City of Fair Oaks Ranch's personnel policies to include the amendments made to section 4.0101.
So moved.
From Keith.
Second.
Jonathan, any other discussion from council? The motion on the table, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion is approved. Thank you all. Thanks, Jim. The next item that we have for consideration tonight is the possible action, approving a resolution of the City Council of the City of Fair Oaks Ranch, Texas, authorizing the placement of 2 radar feedback signs on Dietz Elkhorn Road West. And Carol.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. Carol Van Zant, Assistant City Manager, and with me tonight is also Julie Lovelace, the city's accounting manager. The Transportation Safety Committee has been dedicated to addressing our citizens' concerns about traffic safety and recommending effective measures to protect all road users. One such measure is the use of radar feedback signs, traffic calming device that shows the speed of approaching vehicles, encouraging drivers to adhere to the posted speed limit. For your consideration tonight is a resolution authorizing the placement of 2 radar feedback signs on Dietz Elkhorn West as decided at the council's February 20th workshop. A little bit of background first. In January 2025, a citizen requested installing 2 radar feedback signs at the western end of Dietz Elkhorn Road in an effort to help slow down traffic. On February 5th, after reviewing the request, TSAC recommended installing the 2 budgeted radar feedback signs on Dietz Elkhorn West due to an increase in traffic and due to the road curves. City Council agreed with the recommendation on February 20th. The city manager at that time noted staff would conduct an in-house study using radar counters to determine the best location for the signs. The captured data includes vehicle counts and speed limits from 2 locations on Dietz Elkhorn West. Based on the results, a resolution depicting a recommendation on the placement of the 2 signs would be presented to you for your consideration. This illustration here shows the length of Dietz Elkhorn Road coming from the parkway on the eastern end towards the 4-way stop on the western end. Location number 1, which is the western end, surveyed the traffic from March 11th through March 31st. On the eastern end, the radar signs were moved, and they provided survey counts from April 1st through April 15th. Julie will now dive deeper into the data analysis showing detailed statistics. We hope this information assists you in your decision on the sign placements.
No problem. Good evening, Mayor, Council. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the data that was collected. On the first slide are the average daily vehicle counts. You can see that location 1 did pick up more traffic throughout the day than the signs at location 2. Location 1 going in the westbound direction picked up the most amount of traffic, and the westbound direction is actually the direction going toward I-10 HEB. So that's where you see the 1900. On the next slide is the total average speed recorded for each location. Now, obviously, you had cars going slower than this speed, faster than this speed. This is just the average for those locations. You'll see that location 2 speeds were higher than the ones at location 1. The only place where the average speed exceeded the posted speed limit, which is 35 miles an hour, was the location 2 in the westbound direction, which is again that direction that's going toward I-10, and it was 35.7 miles per hour. Now, looking at this same data a different way, so now you're going to see it for every day when the data was collected. You'll see that there's a notable increase when the signs were moved from location 1 to location 2. So you can see where the line goes up there, and it starts recording at location 2. On the westbound direction, there's an even more noticeable change. And so that's again where you're seeing those vehicles that are going at the fastest average rate of speed. Now, the y-axis on these graphs is compressed a bit just to make that difference pop out a little bit more, make it a little more clear for your eyes. But there is a definite difference between the location 1 and the location 2. And finally, on this slide is the 85th percentile of speeds, which sounds like a weird statistic, but there's actually a good reason why this is measured. It's actually used by traffic engineers as a benchmark for determining the safe and reasonable speeds on the road. What this means is that the speed that's represented here is the one that 85% of drivers are going at or below in normal free-flowing conditions. So when the roads are perfectly normal, there's no weird traffic incident or weather going on. As you can see from the graphs, location 1 has 85th percentile speeds lower than location 2, but you'll notice that all 4 85th percentile speeds are over the posted speed limit of 35 miles per hour. So summing up, the average daily vehicle counts, more vehicles were traveling on the western end and definitely in that direction toward I-10. More drivers are traveling over the speed limit on the eastern end, or location 2, and the 85th percentile speeds are over 35 miles per hour. Radar feedback signs are used as a traffic calming device, and so, the decision would be where makes the most sense to place those signs.
Okay, so in conclusion, the study indicates the optimal placement for the 2 signs would be at the eastern end of Dietz Elkhorn. On page 127 of the agenda packet provides a resolution authorizing the placement of 2 radar feedback signs. We're here to answer any questions you may have.
Go ahead, Ruben.
I don't know do you think the data on the western end was skewed or potentially skewed because the radar signs were so close to the 4-way stop at Old Fred Road and Dietz Elkhorn? So can you pull up the map where the placement? It's packet, page 131 of the packet. So on location 1, for those traveling eastbound, it was like right after that 4-way stop. And then the one facing for people traveling westbound, they're going to be approaching a stop sign. So I'm wondering if that, by its location, lowered speeds, or they didn't get up to speed, or they were already slowing down. And the other thing I was thinking of is on the eastern end, I don't know if you can answer this, but for those traveling westbound on the eastern end, seem to be the highest speeds. Is that a downhill? Okay, so that might contribute to that. My other thought is where you recommend placement, which I think is above, on the eastern end, right above location 2, so for those traveling eastbound, would it make more sense for that to be on the other side of the elementary school? Because I would think that if they're speeding and we want to calm that speeding, it would be better to display that warning to cars before they get into the school zone, as opposed to after they've already passed the school zone. And so that would happen on the westbound travel end because they're not into the school zone. But for that eastbound traffic, they've already gone through the school zone. So that's just some of my thoughts.
Thank you.
To collect this data, we're using the signs that are in place now. That's right?
Correct.
And are the signs, while we're collecting the data that we're using to figure out if we need to be telling people to slow down, are those signs actually displaying the people's speeds to the drivers?
I believe they are, yes.
So would that also maybe skew the data some? Because I know when I see the sign, I slow down whether or not I'm going
Correct.
fast, right? So is there a way to maybe turn the signs off while we're collecting the data? Or at least have them not display for a couple of weeks while we,
We can slow them down. The purpose of the signs is to, as a calming device, is to tell people to slow down, but we can absolutely turn the signs off
and then they would still be able to collect data for this
Yes.
type of stuff?
for this, yes.
Yeah, that might be a little bit more helpful. I mean, okay.
It could. I think that effect would be more prominent for frequent travelers who, once you know the sign there, but as soon as that speed pops up, the data's collected. So if you brake
Well,
after
it
you
does
see
take a little-
it's already showed you at whichever speed you were going. if that
When you're
makes sense,
coming up
right?
to it, you can see the sign well in advance of it telling you how fast you're going, because it just has two little lines that it'll show you until you get, until you're about halfway down the hill. Yeah, it definitely, it doesn't clock you. I mean, you can see it before it clocks you.
If you're looking for the sign, you can see it, sure.
That's right, and that was my question. Could we turn the lights off? That way, if we're trying to collect accurate data,
Scott, I think just make sure I understand. It collects the data before that sign lights up, because, right, it collects the data and then it lights the sign up. So is that what you're trying to communicate?
I won't swear to this, but I believe as soon
Right.
as it lights up, that's the speed you're clocked at. So if you see it, you're going, I'm just using numbers, but if you see, if it lights up at 38, you hit the brakes to slow down, you'll be clocked at 38, if that makes sense.
So I think it's already doing maybe what you're asking, because
well, he's saying when you see 38, it's clocked you at 38.
as soon as it clocks you and then the light shows up, so then you're making your change, but they're capture that sign, that speed at the moment. So I think that answers the turning them off. I think they already have effectively gotten that data. That's my
Well,
understanding.
I would say that next time you drive by it, you'll notice, now that we're talking about it, but it'll show you it just stays there constantly with two little lines,
Right. I've seen it.
And then you drive up to it and you get close enough, and then it tells you how fast you're going.
Yep.
But it is lit up.
The thing is, people have the opportunity to slow down before it's actually clocking them.
That's right. I mean, when you put one out in a new location, maybe leave it off for a couple days or something. That way you have those numbers at least as a metric.
But I think to Councilmember Rivera's point, I think that's exactly what's happening myself, because on the western end, you have several what I would call natural traffic calming devices already. You have the four-way stop, you have the curve, you have school traffic. So it stands to reason that people are more apt to be slowing down for those things in the course of their travel already. On the eastern end, you have basically a mile-long straightaway with the downhill grade that you mentioned. So when you look for, try to get to some explanation for why the speeds are higher on the eastern end, I think that's exactly the reason.
And they're permanent, but they're temporary, correct? In other words, they're
Movable.
permanent, they're movable. Okay.
I think, but you're right. The request is for permanent, but of course they're movable.
And it's already been budgeted.
2 radar feedback sets have been budgeted and have been delivered.
Okay.
Yeah,
And I'm sensitive to the word permanent, just saying. Okay.
Yeah.
because Carol, or Scott, these signs are the ones that bolt on to the speed limit sign, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
So if we wanted to move them later on, we can move them.
Is there a school, I'm assuming the warning for school zone is for eastbound traffic, it's west of Van Rob. There's got to be a school zone. So I don't know, I'm not the expert, but that would seem to be a more appropriate area to put a radar feedback. Because I think if we're going to have it on that road for the eastbound travelers, where you have that location too, from there on, there's really not a lot of, I would say, population. It's sort of I guess, more sparsely populated than the western side. And I would think that if we're going to calm traffic, it's best to try to calm it as they approach that school zone, if that's a problem.
That is one way of assessing it, is there's more on the western end, but if we're trying to calm speeders, the speeders are on the eastern end. So depending on how you look at it, we're happy to place them exactly where you would like them. But
Carol, this is the committee's recommendation, right? Or do we have a recommendation from the committee?
the committee's recommendation was to place two
Place two.
radar feedback signs on Deeds Elkhorn
Gotcha.
West.
Okay.
Yes, and then when we came to city council, we asked if we could do a radar feedback sign to determine the best location.
So they didn't recommend a location?
No, they did not.
Okay.
I mean, just a comment here, it kind of looks difficult to build up any speed at location one because of all the stuff that's going on there. So I can see why the data would be lower. I mean, you've got the stop signs and, you know, what-
You do have the cautionary sign, curve ahead.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. From the school, I believe there's another cautionary sign, curve ahead. And you're coming off of a stop sign.
And there is a stop sign right west of Van Rob
Yes, yes,
before you, okay.
yes.
Ruben asked a question about the school zone sign. Does anybody know where it's at? Is it before the entrance to Elkhorn Ridge, or if you're traveling eastbound, is it before you get to the intersection or after it? I think it was just after it, though.
Okay, I was going to ask the police department or our public works department.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
After you go through the stop sign heading towards Van Rob?
Right,
And westbound, it's right after Noble Ark.
yes.
Have citizens reported, I know some folks came in to talk about the traffic safety issues with the crosswalk itself at that intersection, but did anyone ever bring up the speed in front of Van Rob?
I don't recall, but they might have in the past, but I don't recall any formal complaint either to TSAC or to the city council. Now, having said that, the Transportation Safety Committee is going to, next Thursday, consider a request to lower the speed limit on Deeds Elkhorn. So at that time, next Thursday, we'll be looking at that, using the same data to present to them.
Ma'am, would you mind? Sorry.
Amy Drawn. I'm a resident and I'm in Front Gate. And so regarding the request to lower the speed limit on Deeds Elkhorn, if the 85th percentile is showing that people are traveling around 40 miles per hour, speed limit's already, according to industry standard, ideally set at 35. Lower doesn't seem reasonable. That's why it prompted me to no longer be quiet.
I would say check in with, and see when the next TSAC meeting is. and
Thank
maybe
you.
pop
And
in
yes,
and-
the TSAC
yeah.
meeting is next Thursday, and that will be the same presentation shown to them at 3 o'clock.
Yeah, and this is the
And you
kind
are
of help
spot
that we
on.
need. Yeah.
So Ruben, you were asking the question about speeding in front of Van Rob. During school zone times, like were people exceeding the 20 miles per hour?
Just in general, not
Not
necessarily while the school zone is flashing. It's just my thought is, if we're catching speeders to the east of Van Rob, so they've already picked up speed and they're speeding as they've passed Van Rob. To me, it would make more sense to warn them before they get into that school area, not after they've passed it speeding, conceivably.
But they don't they have a stop sign
Yeah.
right before
Yes.
Van Rob? So doesn't that automatically slow them down at Van Rob?
Yeah.
So it seems like that would be doubling down right there where it's already got something
Yeah.
in place.
I think that I think that school zone sign is at that stop sign.
Right.
You're coming from the interstate.
Yeah, the only thing I would suggest maybe is the one going in the direction that Ruben's talking about. Maybe not putting it all the way before Van Rob, but maybe putting it near the Noble Ark.
It
just,
is.
just before you start going, because it's a hill both ways, right? So if you kind of put it at the first part of the decline, like where you're starting the decline, as opposed to where it is now, looks like, I think it's more towards the bottom of the hill. Is it higher
It's-
up?
It's
Okay.
on the location of 8510, 8510, 8518. And I'm sorry, do you know? It's Noble Ark is the street. If you're going westbound, Noble Ark is the street after that.
Right, I'm talking about the other way, going eastbound. Moving that one a little closer to Noble Ark.
To Noble Ark, okay.
So if it's at the 8500 block right now, Van Rob's in the 8700 block, so.
86.
I believe you're saying just move it to the 8600 block, just a little bit closer to Van Rob.
I don't know, I feel like that's kind of where you start going downhill anyways, so it might catch people before they start that
So
exceeding of the speed limit.
It's hard to see it with the map that we have up here, but
Yeah.
the bottom red arrow, which is pointing eastbound,
Right.
ends at Noble Ark.
presentation.
Right, but the little light thing is past that.
Right, and it would aim up the hill. So you would start capturing your speed as you're coming down the hill.
Okay, so it would warn people as they start the descent?
Yes.
Okay.
I would say regardless of specific placement in location 2, I think location 2 makes more sense just because of the proximity of location 1 to the four-way stop at Old Fred Road, as a general opinion.
I would say between our Public Works Department and our police officers, they've probably gone out and looked at this and made a determination based on their experiences on speeding along this road. I'm okay with the positions that are being proposed in location 2. And obviously, I mean, if it, over time, we take a look at it and doesn't meet the requirements, I mean, we can always move them.
Especially since they're not permanent.
Right. Thank you, Keith.
You're welcome.
And Mayor, I believe that one of the reasons for these areas is because the speed limit sign is there, and we were putting the radar feedback signs
Right.
on the speed limit sign, so it's a dual purpose.
Yeah, I drove by it today. I didn't pay specific attention to the question Emily's bringing up. But I think when I went over the hill and started heading down, there were cars in front of me, but it started radaring us immediately when I was over the top of the hill. And mine was just saying the speed I was going, not slow down. In case that question was coming up.
That's Officer Willis's job.
Any other questions from council? Any questions from anyone here tonight? Yes, sir. Al Schmidt, our president of our Transportation Safety Advisory Committee.
Just a couple of things. Ruben, I think I heard you say that the committee had not been presented with the proposed locations of the quote-unquote permanent signs, and that's correct. And then I thought I heard that our meeting next week, this subject is coming up again?
Speed.
Speed limit.
Reducing the speed, okay. The thing that we did not consider locations after a study was done, and the study's now been done, there's another slide in the package that shows proposed locations, which isn't this one. It was the very last page of page 137.
This is a proposed location.
Right, but that's not that slide.
I'm sorry, we zoomed out so you could see the street.
Yeah.
If you zoom, I'm sorry, if you zoom
No,
out.
I understand.
you-
It's here.
Yeah.
But those two locations, to me, and none of us have talked about it, but to me, those two locations side by side on that end of Dietz Elkhorn, the one on the lower side, which points towards the Parkway, to me, it's too late for that one. That sign, in our discussions at the committee and with the resident, the concern was over to the left-hand side of the screen prior to Dietz Elkhorn turn going toward I-10, that end of the Dietz Elkhorn. And that was the area that has curves, the church, the new housing areas there, the ball diamonds now, or playgrounds, as to would it make more sense to put a speed limit sign down there, which then is telling people at the beginning of Dietz Elkhorn, where the city limits are, here's your speed, slow down, because that's pretty dangerous going through those curves, and then that straight stretch of road is covered by the Van Rob school zone. You could put up another caution sign, but then coming the other direction, have the speed limit sign going toward the school. So I would suggest consideration that those two locations, one on the top stay where it is more or less, but the one on the bottom be moved all the way to the left at where the handprint is now.
I
I
think
think-
that's, go ahead.
I think the data that we saw, though, was in that area, we didn't really have speeders.
That is
Right.
correct.
Okay.
That is correct.
Again, not to beat a dead horse, but I still think that if we were to capture the data with something other than a flashing yellow sign asking you to slow down, that we might have different, for sure we'd catch some people going 50 down Dietz Elkhorn,
Yes, sir.
Jim Roth, a resident. I agree with Jonathan, but my question is, are we a zero tolerance, or are we +2, +10%, +2? That makes a big difference on the data I've seen. Because if we are zero tolerance, we got a lot of income.
I think to your question is that what we're trying to do is provide a safe environment for. But you're talking enforcement.
I think location 2 is probably where we're gonna get the most bang for our buck, if you will. If that's where we're seeing the highest speeds in the greatest quantities of vehicles, and if we only have 2 signs, I think that at least starting there would probably make the most sense.
I agree.
And then if we get other data, if we put one of those signs on the other eastern end, on the wheels signs like we have now, I mean, we could put it down there and do what Jonathan's suggesting, turn it off on that end and see if that makes a difference. And we could always come back and move the permanent sign.
Yeah, what I'm struggling with is on the western side is more populated, more neighborhoods, more kids, more walkers, more runners. And on the eastern side, once you pass Noble Ark, it's really nothing. I mean, because there's really not a lot of homes there. It's, the back of homes with a fence on the northern end and pretty large lots on the southern end. So we're warning them to watch out for deer, essentially. Or other vehicles, obviously, but I don't know, that it would make.
But if we don't have a problem with speeding, then why would
Yeah.
we be putting a speeding, like a warning to slow down sign to people who aren't going too fast?
Yeah.
You know?
So again, Amy, John, so this might be also for that meeting next week, but wouldn't industry standard maybe suggest that you can go up a little bit over that 85th percentile or down a little bit. And to Ruben's point, in that area that's sparsely populated, as opposed to the area that's heavily populated, maybe keeping the speed limit lower on that end and higher on that end. And then we bridge the gap between zero tolerance or 10+2, and we are meeting our safety needs.
I really hope you go to the next TSAC meeting.
The decision that's really before us today is the location of the two radar speed limit signs, not necessarily permanent.
Thank you, sir.
My belief is the recommendation from the analysis that was done is location 2. I'm okay with that. I do believe that if this doesn't work out, that we do have that opportunity. And to Jonathan's point, if we have the opportunity to collect additional speed data, you know, without the use of these signs would be in place, but without using them, then maybe we could collect that data somehow or how. And that may drive us to a decision later on that to move one of the signs down to the western end.
Yeah, I mean, since they're not permanent, then, you know.
Let's do it.
All right. Any other council comments? Any other comments from anybody here tonight? Then can I get a motion to approve a resolution authorizing the placement of the two radar feedback signs
So moved.
on Dietz Corner Road West at location number 2? And Jonathan,
Second.
Emily, any other discussion from council?
Jonathan was speeding right there.
Telling you, man, I'm not perfect.
And you are sharp tonight. All right. With the motion on the table, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The motion is approved. Thank you, council. Thank you, Carol and Julie. And the last consideration item that we have on the agenda for tonight is a consideration possible action approving a resolution authorizing a utility service agreement between the City of Fair Oaks Ranch, Texas, and AD Acquisitions LLC regarding water and wastewater services for an 80.69 acre tract parcel of land at 29850 Ralph Fair Road, a portion of the Corley Tract, and execution of all applicable documents by the city manager. And Grant, you're going to kick this one off?
Yes, sir. Good evening, Mayor, Council. I'm Grant Watanabe, Public Works Director, and I'm here to present a resolution approving a utility service agreement between the city and AD Acquisitions LLC, who is the developer for the 80.69 acre portion of the Corley Tract. Just a quick overview of the property first. The parcel is located at 29580 Ralph Fair Road. This is northeast of the corner of Dietz Elkhorn and Ralph Fair Road. The size of the parcel is 80.69 acres, and again, this is a part of the 160 acre Corley Tract. The current zoning for the parcel encompasses neighborhood residential, mixed-use village, and logistics. The parcel is currently not located in any entity's Certificate of Convenience of Necessity or CCN. However, the city's water, wastewater, and reuse master plan does identify a total of 215 future water and wastewater connections for the total 160 acre tract. To quickly recap some recent actions, back on August 30th, the developer formally requested incorporation of the 80.69 acre parcel into the city's water and wastewater CCNs. On October 17th, the City Council approved incorporation into the CCNs contingent on approval of a master development plan reflecting a maximum of 139 LUEs for water and 137 LUEs for wastewater. On November 14th, the P&Z Commission recommended approval of the master development plan, and then on December 5th, the city council approve the master development plan with a condition that the developer enter into a utility service agreement with the city to memorialize several items, including the following. Number one, the number of units or LUEs. Number two, all related fees related to the provision of water and wastewater services. And number three, any cost-sharing arrangement for off-site utilities. I'll go over the utility service agreement in more detail later in the presentation, but this agreement is a part of a series of steps taken to ensure that the property is developed in accordance with the city's comprehensive plan, the Unified Development Code, and the Water and Wastewater Master Plan. It is also not the last step in the process. The property still has to go through platting and construction plan review. This slide shows a copy of the master development plan that was previously approved by City Council. And to recap, the development will be built in 4 phases. The first phase encompasses the neighborhood residential zone, showing a total of 20 single-family homes built on 1-acre lots. In phases 2 and 3, these phases fall on the logistics zone, where a total of 216 townhomes are planned. That's this location here. The portion to the south of that area is designated for senior living, and then the portion to the north of that area is being designated for family living. And the last phase, phase 4, falls on the mixed-use village zone, and that's where 4 commercial facilities are planned. The development will be gated with private streets. There will be an amenity center and several parks, and that also includes a walking trail that could potentially connect to the Fort Hall Trail system some point in the future. Now jumping into the terms and conditions of the agreement, starting off with the term. Initially, it will be 7 years unless extended by mutual agreement between the city and the developer. The term, if the development starts within 7 years, then the term automatically extends to 15 years or the date that the last lot is conveyed, whichever occurs earlier. Now, the city requested this shorter term when compared to past water service agreements, and this is to avoid a situation where water and wastewater capacity is tied up by a development without breaking ground. When it comes to CCN incorporation, upon execution of this agreement, the city will complete all the required steps to file with the Public Utility Commission of Texas to incorporate the 80.69-acre parcel into our water and wastewater CCNs. And this process normally takes about 4 to 6 months. Moving on to water capacity, the city shall provide water service for a total of 139 LUEs. The builders shall pay the current impact fee of $8,670.33 per LUE at the time that they pull construction permits. Multiplying 139 by 8,670 comes out to about a little bit more than 1.2 million in impact fees on the water side. In addition to that, the developer shall pay the city a one-time water replacement charge of $57,475 at the time of Phase 1 final plat approval, and this is to offset the cost of obtaining future water supply. Under the city's current contract with GBRA, the city must pay a water replacement charge whenever we increase our reserve capacity. And in the 2037 timeframe, we are expecting an opportunity to increase the city's reserve capacity by about 300 acre-feet. This cost will offset the costs charged by GBRA. The developer will also pay a monthly water reservation fee if the Phase 1 final plat is not submitted within 18 months of this agreement, and that's to cover the city's costs for reserving water with GBRA. Again, this helps avoid a situation where the city's water and wastewater capacity is tied up by a development that doesn't break ground, and leaving the city on the hook to pay for the reservation fees. And then lastly, the developer is responsible for all costs associated with on-site water infrastructure. So that includes all of the distribution mains, the valves, the hydrants within the 80.69-acre parcel. Moving on to wastewater capacity. The city shall provide wastewater service for a total of 137 LUEs. The builders shall pay the current impact fee of $6,068.64 per LUE. So multiplying 137 times 6,068 gives you about 831,000 total in impact fees on the wastewater side. The developer will be responsible for all costs associated with on-site wastewater infrastructure. So this includes sewer mains, the manholes, the cleanouts within the 80.69 acre parcel. When it comes to off-site infrastructure, the developer has agreed to assume all costs to extend the 8-inch water and 8-inch sewer mains from the arbors to the development. And it's a little easier to see if I go back to the master development plan. You can see the arbors located toward the top of this slide. These are all existing water and sewer mains. So the developer's plan is to tie in right about here and then bring those utilities down south to their development. That's what this first portion of the off-site infrastructure encompasses. In addition to that, the developer is responsible for all costs to upgrade the Kojak Circle manhole and install a new 12-inch sewer main between that manhole and the wastewater plant. You can kind of see a graphic to the right-hand side. This is the Kojak Circle manhole. And then this is the sewer line connecting that manhole going back to the wastewater treatment plant. Just looking at this short inset map, you can see a force main coming down from Setterfield into this area. You also have the flow coming from the arbors through a 15-inch main coming into this area. You have many connections on these 8-inch mains coming into this area. And all of this is trying to get into a 6-inch main to get back to the wastewater treatment plant. And that, as you can tell, that 6-inch main is undersized. Upgrade of this manhole and this sewer main is a city CIP project. The city did budget $650,000 this year to start this project. With the developer assuming all costs associated with it, that gives us an opportunity to reallocate that $650,000 toward another wastewater CIP project, such as the wastewater treatment plant phase 1 expansion. The timing of this project upgrade is also included and described in the agreement. This project must be completed before certificate of occupancy is issued for any of the new homes in phase 1. And this is to make sure that the wastewater from this new development can be accommodated and that it doesn't cause any further issues downstream. The last component of the off-site infrastructure is the installation of a new 12-inch water main from Elmo Davis Water Plant to this development. The water and wastewater master plan does include a future CIP project to extend water infrastructure to this part of the city, much like we did with the Old Fred Road water line relocation project, which was pulled forward to align with Bear County's road reconstruction project. We are proposing to pull this project forward as well to align with the Deeds Elkhorn reconstruction project. The proposed cost share is 25% for the developer and 75% for the city. And the reason for this cost share is that the 12-inch main is sized to serve all future developments in this area, not just what's located on the 80.69 acre parcel. This agreement requires the developer to complete design within 90 days, and the city does plan to joint bid, if approved, the city does plan to joint bid the new 12-inch water main project with the Deeds Elkhorn East reconstruction project. What this would mean is that the 12-inch water main and the Deeds Elkhorn reconstruction project would happen at the same time by the same contractor. The last thing anybody wants here is to trench through the new road to install a water line after it's been reconstructed. In summary, the approval of the utility service agreement will benefit both parties. For the developer, it secures water and wastewater service for the parcel. For the city, there's several benefits. The first is that the full cost of the Kojak Circle manhole and sewer upgrade will be covered. The second, a portion of the cost of the extend future water infrastructure to the eastern side of the city is covered. It ensures that the water line is installed in conjunction with the road construction. It also helps to loop our water system to increase system resiliency for all the developments east of Ralph Fair Road, including the arbors. This will ensure that we have at least 2 water mains or distribution mains to serve that area, avoiding a single point of failure. And then lastly, it manages the physical development of the city in accordance with the comprehensive plan and the water, wastewater, and reuse master plan. This is the end of my presentation. Pending any questions from the council, the developer is also here, represented by Mr. Rajiv Puri, if you have any questions for him as well.
Go ahead.
So, as far as the monthly water reservation fee, if it's not started within 18 months, are we paying a reservation fee for the first 18 months? And then if they don't start developing, then they essentially are taking that over?
That's correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Ruben.
Yes, sir.
When are impact fees? When are impact fees normally, like the rate of the impact fee, the amount, is it normally calculated when we enter into a utility service agreement, or is it normally calculated when construction permits are pulled? Does that make sense?
Normally, the impact fee at the time of final plat is recorded is the impact fee that's in effect. But in this case, the impact fee that would be effective is the impact fee that's at the date of the signing of this agreement.
Because,
The impact fees are determined by kayak.
and aren't those discussed to change? Wasn't there a recommendation to, or it's going to be reviewed?
We looked at it at the last meeting.
Correct. The CIC did make a recommendation, and that should be coming to City Council next month to schedule a public hearing, and then probably sometime in July to consider a change to our impact fees. That's correct.
So would it, hypothetically, under normal circumstances, are we assessing an impact fee before it changes earlier than we would normally assess an impact fee for any other development under this timeline? Does that make
We have several water agreements out there. Almost all of them make the impact fee in effect at that time, the impact fee that applies to the development.
So it was just a question for discussion is whether it would be the impact fee in effect today or the impact fee whenever final plat is recorded or construction permits are pulled. And if that changes, if the impact fee changes, should it change for, during the process of this and not just lock it in today? That's just a question.
No,
I don't know what's
question.
appropriate. The other question I had is the split for the 12-inch water main, 25% developer, 75% city. You said that percentage was determined because they are not the only ones who are going to be using this water source for that main. So if there's other future developments that are going to access water through this main, are we able to shift more cost onto them, or is the city going to assume the 75%, for the foreseeable future? Can we recoup that money later for future developments? To lower our 75%?
In the event that we enter into another water service agreement or utility service agreement with another developer, that can be part of the conversation.
And any other developments that would potentially go north of this Corley tract, they could be subject to that potentially?
Potentially. But I think the key difference is the Corley tract is not in our CCN, and some of those other properties that you mentioned are already in our CCN.
Okay.
So back to Ruben's initial question, is that the difference that we're seeing with this? That we're doing a utility service agreement which lays out the impact fees as part of it, which is determined today, where in other developments that we've done when the plats are presented, which could be, during phases as part of the development, the impact fee at the time the plat is submitted would determine the amount. Is that the difference? Is because we
Yes.
have a utility service agreement related to this one? Or do
Yes,
we
sir.
always?
I think that's the primary difference.
Okay.
So if we approve this today, we're essentially grandfathering them into this impact fee of, for the water, $8,670.33 per LUE, and then the wastewater one, even if they don't start, or even if they don't submit their plat until after we've already done the impact fee change, if we do the change, and it's higher, they would be grandfathered in under this amount. And say they don't submit that for a year.
That's correct. As written, this would lock in the impact fees at the current rates. That's-
Sure, go ahead, and I'll hold my question.
My name is Rajiv Puri with AD Acquisitions. Mayor, council members, thank you for the opportunity here to answer a few of these questions. I'll take it one at a time. So, Councilman Rubin, the USA, if, as Grant said, this USA is being signed because we're not in CCN. Part of the condition was to get a USA. When you do a USA, this is quite typical that you agree on all the terms of the USA, including impact fees. So this is very common in the industry that we've done that multiple times. And secondly, your question about the city's ability to recover some of the other costs, that is true. In fact, Grant in our USA has already put in language that if we get access to the other part of Corley Track, we've talked about this in the past, that we have right now, we're developing 80 acres. If we have the opportunity, we'd like to develop the full 160 acres, so he already has language in there, that if we go do that, we would modify this agreement to add additional contribution cost towards that water line, by the way. And in terms of other tracks that are already in the CCN, I'm not certain if you require them to do USA, you could probably ask them for it, but if you don't require them to do USA, then you may not be able to, so that would be up to the city. But at least on the other 60 acres, that's already baked into the USA.
Grant, but to your point, sir, that if you develop the remaining acreage, we would have a separate agreement at that time for that specific track, correct?
Maybe not a separate agreement, but an amendment to this agreement to keep
Okay.
all of the general terms and
And
conditions.
so we could adjust those numbers.
To
at
increase
that
the
time.
developer's contribution toward the water main
So this
project.
this wouldn't apply, just for clarity, this wouldn't apply to the
Well,
future.
Well, what about the impact fees? Would if there are new impact fees at that time, would the new impact fee be applicable for the phase 2, I guess you would call it?
Potentially, I'm not sure. If we do a totally separate utility services agreement for the other acres, 80 acres, then whatever impact fee is in effect at that time,
Yeah.
whenever that second 80 acres is developed, we could use the new impact fee at that time.
Okay, yeah, because I think what we're approving now is just for this 80 point whatever acres. Okay.
And once again, just typically, if you do a modification and you're adding additional capacity, then you would have the opportunity to change
Okay.
that for the new track or the additional track.
Well, when I read through this agreement, I didn't see any guarantee that this fee would apply to future development. So I think that leaves it totally, at that time, we would address it.
Yeah,
right?
it actually clearly says that under this agreement, you can't have any
Correct.
more LUEs. So if you go additional LUEs, then you would have to do a modification, which would require both parties to agree to it.
That's how I read it.
Were you done?
I had just another comment,
Go
but
ahead.
I'm going to hold it. Go ahead.
Okay. The Kojak Circle, the 12-inch upgrade, that's going to be adequate for future development, correct?
It's been sized for all future development in that area, that's correct.
And didn't we approved it in our budget, correct? So we're removing it from the city budget and it's being shifted to developer's cost? Is that?
Yes, developer will cover all the costs associated with that project.
Okay, so we're saving money?
Correct.
Okay.
That was the point I was going to make. I think the 650 that we have, and I have it right here from our plan, right? That allows us to free that up to address the larger water main to service that area.
Yeah, that's been in my mind since we started talking about all this, it seems.
Right.
One other comment, if I may make, I think you all picked up on this already, that one of the things that Grant and Scott and the team required us to do is to speed up the design of that water line so that it can be done before Deep Elkhorn is repaved, because just the cost of trenching that later on and repaving is going to be north of $1 million just to deal with that. So that's another thing that Grant's included in the agreement.
Anybody else? Grant, I had a quick question about the water line, the extension, what we're talking about along Dietz Elkhorn, coming from Elmo Davis. And so we're going from a 6 to a 12-inch line? Is that what it was?
This is a brand-new 12-inch line.
Brand new 12-inch line. And do you anticipate any other water infrastructure requirements at Elmo Davis or anything? Increased water tank size? Do we have everything in place that we need that could support this?
Nothing else planned at this time. The system will be able to support this, yes.
Okay. Anybody else? Any questions from anyone here tonight on this? Can I get a motion from council on a resolution authorizing the execution of a utility service agreement between the City of Fair Oaks Ranch, Texas, and AD Acquisitions LLC regarding water and wastewater services for an 80.69 acre parcel of land at 29850 Ralph Fair Road, a portion of the Corley Tract, and execution of all applicable documents by the city manager? From Emily, and a second?
Second.
Any other discussion from council?
Say that I think you guys did a great job on this. A significant savings for the city, so.
Yeah. Good job.
Anybody else? The motion on the table, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion is approved. Thanks, Grant.
Thank you, Mayor.
Good explanation. And that completes the consideration items that we had on the agenda tonight. We do have one workshop item, which is a presentation of the fiscal year 2026 to 30 5-year financial plan. And Summer.
Yes. Good evening. Summer Fleming, Director of Finance. So I am presenting the city's 5-year financial plan for fiscal years 2026 to 2030. Now, this plan is not a forecast. It's intended to provide outcomes given certain sets of assumptions, and it's an integral part of the budgeting process. Each year, the plan will be enhanced with updated assumptions based on policy direction and new information. The model's flexible, so it can be modified based on direction from City Council, and the intent is that this will set the foundation for our fiscal year 25-26 budget, and hopefully we'll have fewer surprises during that process. So some of the challenges that we'll have to discuss through this model tonight include maintaining reserves while balancing expenditure growth and what those reserve goals are, how to fund the drainage CIP, maintaining desired service levels in future budget years, and overall concurrence on the revenue and expense assumptions. So I'll go through both the governmental and utility fund plans and then wrap up with council guidance and next steps at the very end. So this plan was first created and presented to council just 2 years ago to promote long-term financial stability and sustainability. It aligns financial decisions with strategic priorities, anticipates future challenges, supports transparency and decision-making so that the city can maintain healthy reserves and responsible debt levels. So we've modeled a baseline and 2 alternate scenarios for the governmental funds. Now, the baseline covers what we call known knowns, such as wages, benefits, and the current debt service, and it also cash funds the drainage CIP. And then in this baseline, we've modeled the tax rate at the estimated no new revenue rate. Now, scenarios 1 and 2 introduce certificates of obligation to fund drainage projects and adjust the tax rate to maintain either a 50% operating reserve or a 30% operating reserve, which would be a policy change. So starting with the baseline, revenue assumptions include a 5% growth in taxable values annually and the property tax rate set at that estimated no new revenue rate. It includes a 3% increase in sales tax annually, a 45% decrease in interest revenue over the 5-year period, and then all other revenues increase 1.5% annually. And major expenditure assumptions include a 4.5% growth in personnel costs with no new FTEs, 5% increase in health insurance, software subscriptions, and key contracts. We have incremental increases to maintain fire and EMS services, and then we've cash funded the drainage projects. Now, the drainage projects total $1.6 million through 2029. We cash funded $250,000 in this budget year. So looking at the overall composition of services projected in fiscal year 2030, public safety makes up the largest at 47%, and public works second at 27%. General government makes up 22% and includes all the administrative functions such as city management, finance, HR, IT, communications. And because local governments are service-driven, we rely heavily on people rather than products to deliver core functions, so much of these costs are personnel-related. Now, in the baseline scenario with these assumptions, total revenues are not keeping up with total expenditures, and as a result, the unallocated fund balance is fully depleted in 2027, and then future year budgets are being funded from that operating reserve. And so the operating reserve is projected to fall to just 5% of operating expenditures, well below the policy target. At that estimated no new revenue rate, the tax rate decreases and the average tax bill would decrease by $122 by 2030. Now, this includes the scheduled issuances for the general obligation bond, and that's reflected in the INS rate. And so as a reminder, the no new revenue rate is calculated on the total tax rate regardless of how much debt the city has. So if the INS rate rises due to the debt service schedule, the M&O rate has to decrease to offset it, and that puts pressure on the operating budget. Now, the first alternate scenario we've modeled differs from the baseline in that it adjusts the tax rate to maintain the operating reserve at 50% of operating expenditures, and it incorporates the issuance of certificates of obligation to fund the drainage CIP. So now the revenues more closely match expenditures, and the result is that the unallocated fund balance isn't depleted until 2029, and then we're maintaining the operating reserve at 50%, which is our current policy. So we've added the certificate of obligation issuance, and under this plan, the GO bond is spread over 3 more issuances to manage the tax rate. But the total tax rate still decreases due to increased appraisal values, but in this scenario, the total tax bill on the average homestead would increase $215 over the 5-year period. So this scenario preserves financial stability, but slightly raises the tax burden. Now, the second alternative is similar, but it targets a lower 30% operating reserve, which would be a policy decision. This allows more tax flexibility, but reduces the city's financial cushion. So expenditures remain the same, but the revenue coming in has decreased because we're now funding future budgets by that 20% of the current operating reserve that shifts to the unallocated fund balance. So the unallocated fund balance still is fully depleted in 2029, and now we're maintaining only a 30% operating reserve. So in this scenario, the total tax bill only increases $19 over the 5-year period. So again, we're supporting the debt funding, the drainage. It limits the increase of the tax burden, but it's with greater exposure to economic shocks with that lower reserve level. So currently, those are the three scenarios that we modeled for the governmental funds. So just to recap, the baseline, we're staying at the no new revenue rate, and it offers minimal savings on the average tax bill, but comes at a higher cost. It would fully deplete the unallocated fund balance, and then the operating reserve is reduced down to 5%. And that would significantly weaken the city's financial stability and really any flexibility we would have to respond to emergencies or future budget needs. Scenario 1, it adjusts the tax rate between the no new revenue and the voter approval rate. It supports increased cost of operations and maintains a 50% operating reserve. And under this approach with these assumptions, the average tax bill would increase $215 over a 5-year period. And then scenario 2, it adjusts the tax rate to maintain that 30% operating reserve. So the average tax bill increase is limited to just $19, but again, it leaves the city more vulnerable by reducing the operating reserve. So for the utility, we've also included a baseline and alternate scenario. Now, both scenarios use conservative, reasonably certain assumptions, including those known knowns, but the baseline keeps water and wastewater rates unchanged, and then the alternate uses a rate calculation tool to incorporate increases in water rates to support operations and maintain a 9-month operating reserve. So in the baseline, major revenue assumptions include, like I said, current water and wastewater rates, a decrease in drought surcharge revenue, which has been considerably high the last 3 years, a 45% decrease in interest earnings over the 5 years, and a 1.5% increase in other revenue. And then major expenditure assumptions include that same 4.5% increase in personnel costs with no new FTEs, 5% increase in health insurance contracts, and the GBRA water fee. And this includes the scheduled certificate of obligation issuance for the approved CIP. Now, with these assumptions, the operating expenses, including depreciation, are far outpacing operating revenues, resulting in losses. It's easier to see on this chart. Revenues by utility are presented on the left chart and expenses on the right. So high level, you can see that the gradual increase each year in expenses are much higher than the projected revenues. This results in a decrease in the operating reserve, shown in the top gold-colored stack. The operating reserve declines to 35% of operating expenses in fiscal year 2030. Now with scenario 1, it includes water service rate increases beginning in fiscal year 2027 to support daily operations, cover depreciation costs, and maintain a 9-month operating reserve. So these increases include the water service availability charge and the volumetric tiered rates that have been in effect since November 2017. This results in a smaller gap between revenues and expenses. And so here you can see that the incremental increase in revenue is trending the same way as expenses. So this approach, incorporating water rate increases, keeps the utility fund financially stable by maintaining a 9-month operating reserve. So that concludes the presentation on the fund plans and the different scenarios that we've currently modeled. I know I just went through a lot of information quickly, but the goal is to bring this back for council adoption via resolution, because as I mentioned, this will be the foundation for building the fiscal year 25-26 budget. So the first step is to receive direction from council on those revenue and expense assumptions that we've included in the model, the funding plan for the drainage CIP, revisit the operating reserve policy if we want to consider modifying that, and overall the different scenarios that we've presented. Because as I said, the model can be, it's flexible, so we can make changes as council directs. So Mayor, I'll turn it over to you for questions and discussion on those items that we're seeking guidance on.
Questions?
Summer, question. You're looking for guidance from this council, and then, as I understand, you'd bring back a resolution to put this into effect. But if we give you guidance, wouldn't we want to be able to look at this again before we go to that step, like may have an interim step? Because I think this is a lot to consume, you know, and this is my bailiwick, the financials, right? But we would like to suggest that if we give you direction of some scenarios, that we come back to see what from this direction, what that looks like, and then from there decide to have a resolution. But it's just a suggestion how we approach this. Is a lot. This is a big deal. This is a 5-year plan, or at least a 5-year forecast and direction that we're looking at.
I think that's a good idea. And one question I had is the standard, is 30% standard for, or is 50% standard?
Well, it's going to be based on each city and their, how much risk they're willing to tolerate, and, you know, location and what type of emergency situations you may come up with, you know, or you may be susceptible to. GFOA recommends no less than 2 months of operating expense as a reserve. So I don't think there's, you know, a right answer for everybody.
Our current
Or the
policy.
same answer would be for everybody, right?
What's our current policy?
50% of operating expenditures,
6 months.
yes.
Does the bond rating agencies look at that?
They do. However, our financial advisor did mention that he didn't think lowering to 30% would significantly hurt us, because that is still, I think, above GFOA recommendation. Plus, we also still have reserves. We have a equipment replacement reserve, so that's an additional capital reserve that we save for. But yes, they do look at your reserves.
Bit more time. But I think we should stay within our policy.
I think we're trying to make that decision, right, to change policy or not, right? That's what you're asking about the reserve, right, to make a, so I have a few thoughts on that. We have an extensively high reserve. You know, reserves are there for 2 things, right, to unplanned expenditures. Also, if you have cash flow problems, well, cities don't have cash flow problems. Cash comes in at the end of the year from taxes. I would suggest if we look at the reduction of our reserve, which I think we should consider that we do not use those necessarily to offset revenue and deplete those down to the lower level. I would suggest considering if we take and go from a 50% reserve to a 30%, that we would target potentially using those dollars to offset issuing for some projects that are not run rate projects, that would be ability for us to offset any COs. So use those monies to not have to issue as many COs if possible. So my thoughts were, don't use the reserves to fund a tax, you know, equals, you know, a tax freeze per se, or whatever you want to call it, but to be strategic in how we address that. That's my first thought. The second thought is with expenses rising, and I know that in the more detailed analysis, there was some other assumptions in here, and I do expect our expenses to go up. We've seen that just due to the operating cost, and these are not unreasonable assumptions, that we address our tax rates to at least keep our expenses equal to our revenue, so that we don't use unallocated reserves to lower that. My input, those are 2 things I would think we should consider if we're going to move this forward, you know, for the financial stability of the city, as well as to get our reserves down to some maybe different level than we've had in the past. My comments.
So I think, if I understand correctly, at least one scenario would be to still reduce the reserve to 30%, but cash fund the drainage and don't decrease the tax rate to use up those reserves.
Correct.
But use that to really
That's-
drain cash
that's
fund the drainage.
accurate,
So that would
yes.
be another scenario to model. Okay.
Yes.
One thing to consider is, since we're not diversified in our revenue source, that we are very susceptible to a natural disaster and the impact to our city. So we have to keep that in mind. During COVID, when cities that were highly dependent or at least very diversified with sales tax, and they had all the businesses shut down, they had to dip way into their reserves to get past that short period of time for COVID. We didn't have that problem because most of our income comes from property tax. However, one tornado, one wildfire takes out 50% of our property in the Fair Oaks Ranch and reduces that income, even if it's for a year before they're rebuilt, will basically gut our income. So we need to make sure we keep in mind that we have a good reserve because that is our biggest risk. Okay.
Agreed. And also stated policy, which we'd have to change that policy if it was something that, okay.
Yeah, I'm for a high reserve as well. I mean, the other, I like Keith's first point. I think he put it very well. And also, this current administration, we could possibly lose some grants that we were counting on, or, you know, some things that have come up in the future where historically we use grants. Those may not be available to us. Plus, with the price of tariffs, some of those, the cost of the goods that we consume will go up. So there's a lot of unknowns, particularly right now. I would not feel safe, you know, turning any, or not having a pretty healthy reserve.
And my point for needing more time but wanting to stay within the policy is, can we look at that scenario to see if we can make some adjustments to that scenario to make it work for us? But also I always favor not raising taxes. If, you know, keeping the no new revenue rate, I've always been a big advocate for that. So how can we make it work?
To pay high taxes, but I tell you, Fair Oaks Ranch is a really nice place to live and a really nice community for a reason. I think it's really well run. It's really financially sound as well. I don't think that, you know, I wouldn't want to rock the boat.
Well, and another thought on the reserves, I'm not advocating we necessarily go from 50 to 30, but I think it warrants a healthy discussion as to Laura's point. What kind of exposures do we have? And just do that risk assessment on that. But I am not ever in favor of deficit funding our expenses so that we draw down our unallocated reserves or even our any unallocated reserves, because to me, that is kicking the can down the road. So we need to be sure, as much as I agree with Emily on the no new revenue rate, we got to darn well cover our expenses, and that we have to be very diligent about. So, I think that's the fundamental thing about good prudent management. You never want to deficit fund any of this stuff. So, yeah.
In summer, is the no new revenue rate, is that one of the assumptions as part of the model?
Yep.
In the baseline, yes, we have modeled what that estimated no new revenue rate is.
And as she went through it, looking, because the baseline assumption, well, the assumptions that you've provided, I guess they pretty much carried over. And that's one of the things you were asking for. Do we have any issues with? I mean, we've been through these before, kind of determining.
Yes, so most of the revenue and expense assumptions are the same in each scenario. It's just at a point now where we're changing the reserve amount and also how we're funding drainage. I will say that this is kind of an important decision that we would need to make soon. There is current legislation that might change how we could issue certificates of obligation that is actually making progress, that our financial advisor has told us that we should be concerned with. So it would limit you any certificate of obligation issued after, I believe, September 30th, probably. You will not be able to use the INS rate to pay it back. So you would have to fund that payment with your operating tax rate, your M&O. So it looks like, in 2026, we only need $325,000 for drainage projects. We could easily cash fund that now. But if we then wanted to issue a CO for the remaining $1.3 million next year, we wouldn't be able to levy an INS rate to pay that. Our operating budget would suffer. We would have to pay that from our M&O rate. So that is current legislation that would significantly affect us. We are a smaller city, and it affects smaller cities to a greater extent. Also, if we wanted to issue COs this year for the drainage, we would be looking at a timeline of bringing back a notice of intent to issue where we would need to publish it in the paper, and that would come to council on June 5th. So we're scheduled to do that for the scheduled CO issuance for the utility. But if we wanted to consider funding drainage, that would also come to council on June 5th. So at the next meeting, we can still model that scenario of decreasing the reserve and cash funding the drainage with that. I would just hope that we could be prepared at the next meeting maybe to make a decision on issuing debt for drainage.
But I think, Keith, the point that you brought up is we don't ever, through our revenue that we collect each year, we need to make sure that that covers our operating expenses for the year.
Even if we have to increase in no new revenue rate, we have to make sure we consider that.
So maybe as part of that model, with the assumptions that you provided, could we get what that rate would be based on the scenarios you provided? So in some of these, I mean, we're starting to see that we're operating, we have more expenses than we have revenue for the year. Correct?
Yes, in the baseline. Well, in theory, all of them. Yes, because we are using our unallocated to fund that. And again, with these scenarios, I know because we have that unallocated and we've built up that cushion, so we're able to not have as large of tax increases. Even in scenario 1 where we're keeping a 50% reserve, it's increasing the tax bill $215. That's over 5 years, so that's $45 one year, maybe another $45 the next year. That's how much it's increasing each year.
Unallocated that we have really wasn't a planned unallocated. I mean, we planned to expend it, but we didn't hire all the people, or some people left their positions, and so we always obviously do a balanced budget, right? We don't plan to, unless we plan to move it into the reserve for a particular reason. And historically, over the last 3 or 4 years, we've always had unallocated amounts, close to $1 million. That's significant, you know. Not that we planned for it, but it's just been historically the way it's been. So what we're seeing here is kind of the worst case scenario as far as we're not building it unallocated every year. We're assuming that's just being built down. So it's possible that in next year's budget there would be, when we close it out, we'll have more unallocated, would add to it, and we wouldn't have to increase the tax rate as much.
That's always a possibility. I will say
You can't plan for that, yeah.
And a lot of those surpluses were from personnel savings, as you mentioned. Sometimes there was several years where it was up to $500,000 in personnel savings. So each year, at least in the last 3 years since Scott got here, we have gotten better at our budgets to where we're not having such large surpluses. And in this financial plan and in our current budget, we're also budgeting for vacancies already in each personnel department, specifically Public Works, Public Safety. Those have the highest percentages of vacancies. And in this plan, you'll also see, I don't know what page it is in the agenda, but on the actual financial report, we just have a plug of $300,000 savings each year. So we've already added in, assuming that we might have that expenditure savings that we normally have, that we can never really say where it's going to come from, how, but we did put that into this plan already.
One of the, on your scenario 1, and Laura's correct. I mean, these unallocated reserves are not, and we don't budget for that, and they happen. But if we deplete our unallocated fund balance down to 0, and all we have is the operating reserve, then we have a policy problem if we need to do something on an emergency. So it's possible that a scenario we consider is taking our operating reserve, our reserve, and breaking it into 2 buckets. One that keeps it at a 30 or 40, whatever percent makes sense, and then one that's available just in case we have a fire or we have some kind of emergency. But if we have an unallocated fund balance that has no money, then if we have that problem, we're gonna have to come back to council for a policy change or something to address it, the fiscal issues. So it may be more of how we address the operating reserve versus necessarily reducing it. And based on our risk assessment, and Laura made a good point, we just went through that recently with the red flag warnings that, we could have, like, I don't know, was it 8 years ago, 9 years ago, we had the potential fire jumping over from Camp Bullis and Stanley. So I think we just need to be thoughtful. I don't want us to get into a situation where, one, we have not enough revenue coming in to cover our expenses, and two, we get down to operating reserves and we have nothing to address an emergency situation. So how all that's supposed to factor out, that's what I think the council should probably be sure we do from a financial responsibility. It's a lot. It's a lot of thinking. Now,
That plan also sort of projects expenses without considering potential cuts to those expenses.
True. And these, your assumptions are very reasonable. There was nothing here that was outstanding as out of reason. So based on your assumptions, and of course we can't see the future, we're trying to figure it out. We can kind of see what's going to happen here with the numbers and with what you showed. So where does that leave us? I think I've talked a lot. I don't think I've given you any direction.
What are the two factors that we're looking at? So one is, reducing the reserve, but that's a stopgap that gets us through 2 or 3 years.
And it limits the increase of
Right,
the
for
tax
those 2 or
rate.
3 years.
Correct.
So really, the balance is between increasing the tax rate or
Increasing services. That's the only way you're going to cut the expenses
Yeah.
you're talking about, Ruben. So you're just going to have to go and say, we're not going to do that anymore, which I don't know what there is. There's nothing to cut.
Todd, I have a
We're only doing
question.
basics.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
What's our policy with the operating reserve? What can it be used for? I don't know it off the top of my head.
I'd have to pull up the language, to be honest, but generally, it's geared towards emergency scenarios, but I'm sorry, I don't have the exact language in front of me.
So if that's
but
the case,
it's
then
a 6-month
it-
reserve to be used for.
We don't run into that problem that I suggested if we keep our reserves at these levels. If we can use it for emergency, if it's truly in the policy, I'll have to go back and read it. I'm not up on that.
And there's a variety of reserve policies out. I actually give seminars on this, and one of my prior lives, I think the comment you made, Councilmember Roden, was that some places will, there's different terminologies, but some will develop a policy that has a total, but broken into at least 2 buckets, often referred to as an emergency reserve, which is your absolute floor for, as it states, emergencies, catastrophes, that type of thing, and then another level, which is sometimes referred to as a countercyclical reserve, which is for cash flow and potential economic shocks, recessionary scenarios, or unforeseen economic things. So
COVID.
COVID is a great example of that you can define that in 2 ways. I've seen that in several places.
But, one, council's made a policy decision that will maintain a 6-month reserve for our general fund. And so it would take a consideration to determine, do we want to change that? But even then, as we were talking through it, we could change it to 30% if that were the case, but it only provides us a stopgap for 3 to 4 years.
Right.
So all we're doing is we're spending our reserve on our operations that we're not pulling in enough revenue for. Is that
Yes.
okay?
That's the exact problem that we fixed when we created these reserves, was for the first 20 years of the city. We would just buy things out of our reserve, bring it down to nothing, build it up for 5 more years, buy something, bring it down. So we've been trying to get away from doing that.
Well, I'm not in favor necessarily of decreasing it per se. But if we were going to decrease it, I would absolutely oppose using it to offset tax revenue. I would only support using it for projects that we could not have to go out and borrow money for, specific hard asset projects that impact the city. But I'm right in here not advocating necessarily a 30% reserve, but if the council decides to do that, I would not be in supportive of it helping offset the tax rate. So, because you're right, Laura, you're right, that would be where we'd be before, so.
A lot of discussion. I'm not sure that we're providing you the information that you're looking for.
What do you want from us?
Well, I guess if everybody concurs with Councilman Roden on the revenue and expense assumptions, we know that we can leave those in all the scenarios that we model. If we're fine with these scenarios, we can always just add another. If you still wanted to see decreasing the reserve to 30% and then cash funding the drainage to see what that does. I mean, that's the only other change I heard that you would want to see.
Yeah, the only thing that I was asking is that really the impact is on the tax rate, and I'm not sure what that impact is. And so what the model or the assumptions we've made is it will always maintain at the no new revenue rate.
Only on the baseline scenario.
Only on the baseline.
Yes, in the other scenarios, we adjusted the tax rate to cover operating expenditures and then keep the reserve at either 50% or 30%. So we have adjusted the tax rate. Essentially, that's the only thing you can adjust to pay for your budget.
Right, okay.
That was in scenario one, right?
Scenario
Scenario
one,
one and
well,
two.
they both adjust the tax rate. Just scenario two makes the tax rate higher because you're keeping a 50% reserve.
Right.
And scenario one does, and then scenario two, it's an increase, but a smaller increase.
Yeah,
Scenario two.
in every case, it never gets up to the voter approved rate, so we're still below the voter approved rate.
Yeah, I got that.
Well
I
below, yes.
Well below
Yes.
that, so.
I just didn't know what the impact was.
That was the point I was going to make.
On page 194.
But even, so when we looked at the difference between scenario one and scenario number two, are we using our reserve to offset a tax increase?
We are, because I know historically that's the number one goal of council. So it's always our goal to minimize tax increases, but at some point it's necessary to cover your services and your expenditures.
Which, in this case, which you present in scenario number two, we're good for 4 years. But then we've now depleted our reserve to 30%. And so I would anticipate by that time, then we're looking at a significant tax increase
Yes,
into 2030.
that's right.
Not be able to do without going to the vote, going to a vote.
Right.
So we are one of the few cities that don't just automatically go right to the voter approval tax rate and just do that every single time. We actually intentionally try to go below it as low as we can. But most cities just say, okay, voter approval tax rate, that's what we're going to do every single year, and that's what they do.
Well, honestly.
We
we've
don't do
been
that.
at-
Yeah.
Ours has been no new revenue rate for the
Right.
last 5 years, so.
Right, we're the opposite, yeah. But at the same time, now we also have to actually cover expenses, so can't do that forever.
All right. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Okay, so, under any of these scenarios and with the assumptions that are modeled here, as you can see, the no new revenue rate does not suffice under any of these scenarios. And honestly, the primary driver of that is your assumption for public safety, specifically fire and EMS. We know those costs are going up. That's your driver. And how that looks precisely is still under discussion, but we know that's going up. That's your primary driver. So what we can model as an alternative based on this discussion is whether it's a 30 or 50% or both, they're essentially the same except for the revenue equalization is to to potentially look at buying down some of that debt, cash funding CEOs potentially, and making up that revenue incrementally up through year 2030. Summer, if you can go to maybe the line chart on scenario 1 or 2, either one will work. The revenue and expenditure line, there you go. So adjust the total revenues, that yellow line, so that by 2030, it's equal to the total expenditure line, because what you're hearing, I think that's correct, is we don't want to get to 2030, adjust our reserves down to whatever threshold we set, and then fall off kind of a fiscal cliff. We're not structurally balanced in 2030. So we can rerun the model with those scenarios, except adjust the revenue base so that we're at least balanced in 2030, and see what the tax impact of that would be.
Yes.
I have maybe a suggestion in that we, let's just assume we keep the 50% reserve. I think everybody seems to like that. I'm not opposed to it. So then, instead of using the unallocated reserve to lower the tax rate until 2029, that we work our tax like we do every year based on the expenditures that we're going to have, and that sets our rate. And then if we have unallocated reserves that are sitting out there at $1 million or $500,000, we could utilize the unallocated reserve, separate and apart from the operating reserve, to maybe fund some more of these drainage projects and not issue COs. Thereby, we're not subsidizing the tax rate, and we're actually using these reserves for specific projects and get to be able, and that, for the long term, that helps us so we don't incur debt. And so that also helps our tax rate down below, down in the future. But that would be my suggestion, that we keep revenue equal to expenses in your model. And then we can take the unallocated reserve at this committee, figure it out as we go each year. Can we just do some of these with that reserve? You can even throw some suggestions into the scenario. That would be my suggestion. I really want revenue to equal expenses. And I'm glad we've been able to keep it. You know, we've kept expenses flat. I mean, yes, they've gone up a little bit, but they've not gone up dramatically, and we've done a really good job on that. And but we're going to face some expenses coming up, and we need to be sure revenue equals that. And it's going to be our job to make sure we really take a hard look at our budgets, and we do that already. So just to continue that diligence.
I agree with the comment that you had. I'm concerned at that 2030 mark, what we're predicting for it if we start spending our unallocated reserve and our reserve to keep our tax rate low. Because you said fall off a cliff. Yeah, I mean, we'd be looking at a significant tax rate increase in 2030.
Yes.
I do like the idea, and I guess I didn't realize it was we were going through it. We're using the unallocated reserve to offset increases in the tax rate. And I kind of like Keith's proposal on that we allocate that more towards our capital improvement projects, and with this would be in the stormwater projects that we have laid out. That seems to make more sense to me than, but then what it does is, what's the impact on the tax rate year by year by not doing that? Because then we won't be able to maintain a no new revenue rate. And so that's what, I don't know what that difference is.
Sure.
So that's what I was asking. Can we get something that, I don't know, projects that difference?
So it sounds like we have reasonable consensus on the baseline assumptions.
Right.
With the variable being the projected tax rate needed to maintain structural balance in the out years.
Yes.
That's something we can go back and remodel.
That's modeling Keith's suggestion, right? Okay. Yeah.
Right now, we're just using a baseline tax rate, no new revenue, as close as we can. What I would like to see is the variations in the tax rate.
Right. Me too.
Okay. And then, I don't know, we have a question was, can we bring this back to see it one more time? Basically, I think we've added a couple factors to it, so we probably want to see it anyway. And is there a timeline on when we need to get this done by?
For the model itself, I mean, it frames the budget, so as we go through the process, that's going to define how myself and staff set the budget for you. So
Okay.
ideally, we do that before we start the workshops, which I think the first one is June 5th. We can mix and match, we can adjust, but from a model standpoint, we need it as, well, certainly before we adopt the budget, but hopefully long before then. What Summer's getting to is the more pertinent question on the debt service and whether or not to issue certificates of obligation, both for the drainage and the utility, but primarily primarily the drainage is the big question. We do have to do that by June 5th. We need to make a determination on whether we want to issue debt or cash fund the drainage projects at that time.
Well, we have one more meeting right before then.
We will bring this back to you on May 15th.
Okay, so I think, the assumption, keep 50%, keep revenue equal to expenses, and then you take the unallocated reserve, and I guess maybe make some suggestions of how we could utilize that, and we can either agree, and if we do, then we know what the debt issue would be in the June meeting.
So if we can get there, we'll model it, we'll come bring it to the May 15th workshop. If we can reach a consensus there, we'll bring back forth a resolution for you adopting the model on June 5th, along with potentially a what's the procedure to notify of the.
A notice of intention to issue COs.
That's the one.
And I will say that last year, because we were still in this unknown territory on drainage, we did it in June also, and our notice of intention was to issue COs for drainage and the utility. That was just a notice saying we're intending to. We didn't actually issue the COs for drainage. So just putting out that notice doesn't lock you into having to issue COs for drainage. So we could always do that again this year as we work through the budget a little bit more.
That's a good point.
That's likely what we might need to do.
That makes total sense. Let's do that.
Yep.
Let's do that.
And then I guess for the utility fund, if there was any questions on the revenues and assumptions, again, this model didn't propose any rate changes this year, but it was just a highlight on where we might need to go in fiscal year '27. We have the rate calculation tool that Raftellus, the firm that did the utility rate study, provided us. We've been able to modify it a little bit, and we are incorporating it into this 5-year financial plan. So possibly next year, we can have a workshop on that to discuss the necessary rate increases that may need to happen further down the road.
That's a good point. I just want to reiterate that we didn't hit the utility too much, but Summer mentioned in her presentation that we have not adjusted the water rate since 2017. Now, you might say, what do you mean? We increased rates last year, right? We adjusted the debt service fees for a projected capital improvements program, but the actual rates that fund operations have not been adjusted since 2017. So what Summer was modeling is around 2027, we start taking a significant loss on the operating side, and that's what the baseline scenario shows that, and the scenario 1 attempts to remedy that.
Scott, when we did that include our anticipated issuance of these COs when we set our rate?
For the debt service and the capital fees.
Okay.
Yes.
Right. Okay, gotcha.
All right. Does that provide you the information that you were looking for tonight?
It's clear to
move
me.
forward.
Great work.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks, Summer. That completes the workshop item that we had tonight. Does any council member have an announcement that they'd like to make tonight? Keith?
I'd like to make just one announcement. I know there's been a lot of questions, how can you keep up with what goes on at council, in the city council in the city, and I just wanted to mention that we have quite a number of outlets, and if people aren't familiar with it, I was just going to give a quick rundown that each week, you know, we post our meetings and agendas and attachments on the city's website. We have live streams, like this meeting is being live streamed, and the archive for later viewing. We also post updates regularly on Facebook, Nextdoor, and now at the Greet magazine puts updates. Also our new, I forget the name of the community?
Impact.
Impact, yes, they also record some things. Mayor, you often put short videos about council meetings. I've noticed this lately, as well as on social media. The council holds town halls, city holds town halls. Council members are available for discussion. Any of us are available. Call us, write us. We'll meet you for coffee. And then just on top of that, last Saturday, I was at Spotted Deer in the morning to be available to answer any question anybody has about the city that's going on, what we're talking about. So I just want to make folks realize that we're doing our best to be sure information is available.
Emily, do you have a?
I was just going to remind everybody about the election on Saturday, which you probably have on your list, Greg.
You do? If you cover it, you're good.
Yeah. The election is Saturday. You should vote here in this room if you did not vote in early voting. Also, at the same time, we're having Shred Day at the elementary school right next door to us. And there's the Fair Oaks Market Days down at Cibolo Church. So I don't know the times on that, but all that's happening, and Lemonade Day. So many things on Saturday.
Exciting day. To follow up on Election Day is Saturday, May 3rd. Polls are open 7 to 7. You can vote here in the police training room or at Bernie City Hall are the two locations that are available. But 7 to 7 on Saturday. And we got a notice this afternoon about the bridge over the Cibolo Creek on Ralph Fair Road. And supposedly, while we've been in this meeting, they have redirected the traffic over the new bridge. So both north and southbound lanes should be going over the bridge. And they're going to start work on the old lanes and putting the new bridge in on that side. They did caution that there still is a lot of work, construction going on the bridge, so just be careful as you're driving across the new bridge. Scott, anything else?
Nothing further from me unless you have questions.
Does any council member have anything that they would like to add to a future agenda? What do you think?
Am I allowed to? These are all the things I'd like the council to.
Anybody else? Okay. We are going to go into executive session tonight. Pursuant to Section 551.101 of the Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code of Quorum, the governing body hereby convenes into closed session. We'll do this under consultation with attorney related to discussion related to possible terms and conditions necessary to resolve disputes that have been the subject of ongoing litigation with the development commonly known as Burning Ranch Estates LLC, also known as Fair Oaks Meadows. Scott, for this, we'll need council, city manager, city attorney, assistant city managers, and
Public Works Director, yes.
everybody else. Yeah. And I anticipate 45 minutes to an hour for this meeting. And Christine, I have the time now is 9:03, and we are moving into executive session.
Okay, Mayor.
Can you hear me okay? I have the time is now 9:57 and we are back in open session. During our time in executive session, there were no decisions made that required a consideration back in open session. Christina, anything that we missed as part of the meeting or anything else that we need to cover?
No, sir.
And Scott, from you?
No, sir.
All right. I have the time now is still 9:57 and we are adjourned.